Hey guys, Zane here with another one take review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Perfume Genius album, Ugly Season. Ugly Season is the latest studio album from experimental pop artist Perfume Genius. Although his previous efforts have been undeniably experimental to varying extents, many individuals, including myself, have believed that the man behind albums like Set My Heart on Fire Immediately should really just embrace the full weirdness of his mind. Ugly Season sees Perfume Genius finally succumb to all of his quirks and oddities as an artist, resulting in what is easily his strangest record so far. In fact, it may be one of the strangest albums of the year so far. From the second that the album opens with the ambient Just a Room, it should be obvious that Ugly Season is a massive beast, but it's not because it's bombastic in scale or anything like that. Rather, Perfume Genius's work here is chilling, as even the most upbeat and energetic moments on the album are just tissue built upon a bone skeletal structure that's really based on a unnerving and even slightly disturbing at times atmosphere. Heavily comparable to arguably more avant-garde albums like This Heat's Deceit and Suicide's self-titled record, this album from Perfume Genius, Ugly Season, is really the bending of art pop from slightly odd off-kilter pop music to something that is equally as beautiful as it is stupefying in presence and execution. Perfume Genius's voice itself is especially haunting. Throughout Ugly Season, we see our main performer walk a seemingly razor-thin line between grooving to the next song of the summer and crying out in the middle of a mental breakdown, and you can never really tell which direction it's going to go next. Perfume Genius is an utterly terrifying force here, and at times during Ugly Season, it does feel like listening to this record is almost like hearing the sort of self-destruction of an emotionally crippled, wounded man in audio form. It's genuinely uncomfortable sometimes, but that's the brilliance of it. The actual compositions of Ugly Season are obviously what make it the noir, industrial-esque experiment that it is, but the panicked yet still controlled vocals of Perfume Genius really do add a lot to the overall atmosphere. His voice can go from very soothing, pleasant, and even somewhat comforting if it weren't for the instrumentation, to generally distressing, and I think that ultimately just goes to show how amazing of a performer Perfume Genius is and how much respect he really does deserve as an artist. Everything here on Ugly Season feels very disjointed and even musically murky, on purpose, of course, and that's great because it leads to something that's genuinely difficult to grasp upon first listen. It can actually be a bit overwhelming at times. In fact, even after a number of one-on-one personal sessions with this record, with Ugly Season, I still can't really say that I can fathom everything that Perfume Genius here is doing creatively. It really just feels like something that you need to constantly re-experience and dig up new factors and aspects about the album that you just simply can't catch the first time around because you're too busy being just waved in awe by whatever is being presented from song to song. Ugly Season is an intimidating husk or shell of modern pop music as it creepily shambles its way across a minimalistic, barren wasteland with no one else and seemingly no end in sight. Now, don't get me wrong, for somebody who can't really appreciate something, or music especially on the extremely abstract side of things, this album can easily come across as something that's just being avant-garde for the sake of being weird. However, the uncomfortable and nearly apocalyptic notes that Ugly Season contains are ultimately what leads it to become this very beautiful yet still disarming listen. The experiments with classical here and experimental forms of classical music such as Impressionism and piano minimalism are another thing that really just adds to the general strangeness of this record and of Perfume Genius's overall ideas on his latest effort. If anything, those light classical influences just really further Ugly Season as an album that seems to be uncertain of its context or its place in the current musical landscape, and frankly, I don't really know its place either. It just simply exists in its own realm at the moment. But that seems to be the ultimate mission statement, if you will, of Ugly Season, to define itself in a manner that it can easily be compared to similar artists or records from both the past and the present and current moment in music, while still taking up enough odd influences and unique, unexpected even tones that it feels incredibly distinct from anything else you've ever heard. I mean, really, unless you're a casual white noise listener and your favorite artist is Merzbow, you might actually be really taken aback by Ugly Season, even if you are familiar with previous Perfume Genius works. The way that the album ends off with the dread-inducing yet still lovely piano piece C note really just kind of captures the overall balancing act of normalcy and abstract avant-garde style that this record contains. So, overall, Ugly Season is frankly an amazing album that I am very, very close to referring to as a masterpiece, but not quite. Really, there's only a couple of small things that keep me from truly giving this a 5 and referring to it as an avant-garde masterpiece. Maybe the fully classical piano pieces could have been placed as interludes a little bit better than they actually were. As it stands, they're just kind of put in there for the sake of being there, and that's really the only aspect of the album that I would consider weird for the sake of weird without purpose. But that's just really one minor factor that does hold this album back ever so slightly, but that doesn't stop Perfume Genius from being, well, a genius. Ugly Season is strange in that it feels comforting but discomforting. I mean, for one person, I'm sure this will be someone's comfort album, and for another person, this will be an album that you'll listen to for the first couple of tracks and then immediately turn off because it was just unpleasant to listen to. It's truly a polarizing album, even with its own compositions alone, and I'm sure reception will be equally polarizing in that regard. However, Ugly Season is still Perfume Genius finally embracing the weird, so to speak, which is something I've wanted him to do for several albums now, even though I have appreciated his previous works to be sure. But really, this is the magnum opus of his career thus far, and maybe it'll end up being the magnum opus of his career overall once he eventually retires or whatever, way down the line, hopefully. But as it stands, I'm going to give Ugly Season 4.5 stars out of 5. It's just a brilliant album overall, one that I really adore, and one that I would really highly recommend, even if you weren't really super into his previous albums, you weren't really jazzed by them or anything like that, because this feels like almost a different artist in a way. This feels like something that's just so much more experimental than the slightly experimental work Perfume Genius was doing before, and again, this is easily his best work, so again, highly recommended, and again, 4.5 stars out of 5. With that being said, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you guys in the next one.